All right, hello everybody. This is a continuation of Unit 3 notes on for loops. This particular screencast is for for loops and sequences. And in this set of notes, we'll look at um, the different types of sequences we know already, those being string and range, and then we'll also introduce a new sequence called a tuple. Right? We'll also look at iterating through these and a couple other useful features to use with for loops. Okay, so let's get started. So we'll be in the for loop sequences Python file over here in your side panel. So just make sure you have the correct import set up. And some of this will be a little bit of a review from what we did already. But to recap, remember that a sequence is just an ordered list of elements. As I mentioned, we already know a string. We've also introduced range at this point. So, for example, range 5, if you want to do range 5 as an example, right, that is, I'll get my caps lock on. It's just an ordered list of integer numbers. So that being, in this case, range 5 starts at 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, another example is that strings. So for example, the string hello is not the same as hello backwards. Right? The order matters with strings. All right. So those are two examples of sequences. An element is just a single item from any one of these sequences. So, for example, if the H character, the string hello, is the first element in the string hello. And by now we've been introduced to this idea of a for loop and the fact that we can iterate through a sequence using a for loop. So to iterate, when we say that, it just means to step through a sequence in order, accessing one element at a time. So therefore, with a for loop, we can say it iterates through a sequence, executes the body of the loop for each element in a sequence. All right. So we've already looked at this example in the introductory screencast. If you have a string, like computer science, for example, and you write a for statement for letter in computer science, that allows us to print each letter in computer science one at a time. If we want them to show up on the same line, we can use our end equals to achieve that. Okay, so I'll go ahead and run this loop. Right. There's some other stuff going on in this code, but right at the top here, you can see computer science gets printed all on one line. All right, and to recap the different parts of a for loop, the for statement starts with the for keyword. The looping variable is the variable that you are going to initialize as part of this for statement. The in keyword is an operator that will look inside of a sequence. In this case, our sequence is a string, computer science. For statement ends with a colon, and then the loop body is going to be anything indented inside of the for loop. Oftentimes, you will see I used as a looping variable. It's a convention, but you're going to see it quite often. So oftentimes, if I want to print out a loop, I might use just I as a default value. Now, it might be better to use something else. So I don't encourage you to always do this. But if you're, for example, just going to print out some numbers, you might, as a default value, use I as your looping variable. And in this case, this loop continues to print on the same line because all we've done is print with end equals at this point. So if you want to get this to print in a different fashion or in a different line, you probably want to include a new line character or print in between these two. All right. So knowing that, see if you can just accomplish this challenge then. So display a secret message. So you're going to ask the user for a message and then display it back with every letter doubled, displayed twice. So for example, if the message is great, then the output would end up being great with every character doubled. Okay, so here's your message variable. Go ahead and pause the screencast and see if you can write that loop. All right, so the way you would solve this is you would create a loop to iterate through your message. So for I in message. And then if you're going to display every character twice, you can take every character. And using string repetition, we can double it using the multiplying by 2. So I think that's how I'll do this. You could also just print I twice and equals if you want it to happen on the same line. All right, so then if we have a message like hello world, we'll print out each character in the message twice. Right, now keep in mind, as a quick question to you, check yourself on this. If you need to pause the screencast, you can go ahead, evaluate this loop, right, and predict what would happen if this were to run, like what would be printed. You can answer for yourself down here. So go ahead and pause and answer that right now. Right, and when you come back, the answer to this would be ha ha. So for each letter in string, remember a for loop is really just a counting loop. It's going to happen a certain number of times. So how many letters are in the string? 2. Right, so there's 2 letters in this string. So this loop will happen twice. So what are we doing twice? We're printing string twice. So printing string once, ha, printing string again, ha ha. That's why you get ha ha displayed here. Again, the end equals is throwing us off, so we might want to include some extra prints to space things out a bit. All right, next topic, right, now that we have for loops and strings covered, is a really useful function called len, which is a built-in Python function that we're going to be able to use. We use this a lot. So what this does is it returns the number of elements in a sequence. It returns it as an integer. So return the number of elements in a sequence as an integer. Okay, let's see how this works. So if we have a word saved, we are storing the word bananas, for example, and we want to see how many characters are in that word, we can use this len function to find the len of the word bananas, right? And if we count this up, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? We should get the number 7 printed, and that's what prints right here. Okay, so there are 7 characters in that word. All right, we can do this with other types of sequences. So we can print the len of a range, for example. The range of 5 is 5 elements long. Right, so no matter what the sequence, the len function can return to you the length of it. Okay. So challenge then, save your first and last name in one string in a variable, and then display how many letters are in your full name. Okay, first and last name. And then think about after it prints out, what did you learn after you did that? So go ahead and pause the screencast and try that. All right, so here's my name in a string, so name. So the name is len of name long. Right, if we run that, we can see that Matt Callahan is 14 elements long. And if you count up the characters, right, my first name in this case is 4 characters, plus 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 is my last, including my last name. Right, so what happened there, and you might intuit that the space is included, right? So that space in my last name is counted. So the answer here is what did you learn? You possibly just learned that the len function counts spaces, and it counts all characters. Okay, so you might want to be aware of that. All right, we've also got these operators we've looked at a little bit before, but they become even more important now again with for loops, because we're even using this in operator in the for statement, right? For I in range 5. Okay, so that in operator is useful with for loops. Let's remind what that operator does all on its own. All right, so what this can do is it can check to see if an element is or is not in a sequence. It's useful for strings and other types of sequences, and then it's going to return to us a Boolean value. Okay. So let's look at the in operator. All right, so remember the way you do this with the if statement would be to check if, for example, A is in your name, for example. You could look to see if you have an A in your name. And then we'll convert that to lowercase, just so we're dealing with the same type of case throughout. All right, if you do have an A in your name, we'll print awesome. You have an A. Otherwise, you don't have one. And then we'll maybe display something in that case. Say you don't have an A. Right, so my name, I have multiple A's. So mine prints out that awesome, you have an A. Right, so for your name, it might do something different. Okay, so let's look at the not in operator. So the not in operator, you can check to see if E not in my name. Again, we'll convert to lower. Convert to lowercase here, so we're dealing with the same type of characters. And then in this case, it would be you don't have an E. And the else scenario would be that you do. So in my case, I don't have an E in my name. So mine prints that I don't have an E, right? So did not find the E in the name, so not in returned. In this case, this expression returned false. I'm sorry, returned true, right? Okay, so challenge. So go ahead and pause the screencast here and see if you can try these challenges. There's a challenge and an advanced challenge. You can try both of these if you want. It's related to coming up with a password. So asking the user for a password, at least 6 characters long, has to contain these certain characters. And if they give you a valid password, you'll display whether it's valid or not. All right, so it's a little password checker program. Here's an advanced challenge. Can you use a while loop to keep asking until the user enters in the correct form? All right, so go ahead and pause and give that a shot. All right, welcome back. So here we go. The password is entered as a string here. So I'm going to copy and paste a solution in here. So it asks you to make sure the password had at least one of these, right? Either an exclamation point or a $sign. So you can check that. All right, it's a good idea, all right, because of order of precedence, to make sure that things happen. So you can use these parentheses here to make that the case, so that all of this is evaluated together. And then the AND operator, the other thing that had to be true for your password to be valid was it had to be at least 6 characters long. All right, enter a password that's greater than 6 characters, actually. So it should look like that. Okay, so whatever password we enter, password, Boolean exclamation point, that's a valid password. Let's test to make sure that it's working the other way. I put hi for my password with a $sign, let's say. That's invalid, right? So you'd want to thoroughly test this, but it seems to be working so far. Okay, the advanced challenge, if you try that, all right, here's a solution for that. So in this case, we'll keep asking while a certain scenario is true, right, until it becomes false and the person has actually entered the valid password. So in this case, we can print valid password once we get past this while loop. All right, so here's the first scenario we're going to check for. So while if the person does not have both of those, then we want to keep, or if they don't have at least one of those, we want to keep asking in this case. So if there's no exclamation point in the password and there's no $sign in the password, then they haven't fulfilled that requirement, right? Right. And the other scenario is that the len of the password is less than 5. So either that's the case, or another way that they can fail our test is that the length of the password is less than 6. And if that's the case, right, our loop would also want to continue, right? We want to keep asking them for that new password. All right, so let's test that out. All right, so that's a valid password. So here's our loop then. Greater than 6 characters, and it has to contain, all right, so a really long password. It says please try again. Let's do a short password, exclamation point. Please try again. Fill the requirements, and we're good. All right. All right, so we'll end this first part of these notes here, right, and then we'll continue in the next screencast by looking at a new type of sequence called a tuple.